The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nathaniel Blackwood's corner office, each drop echoing the frustration building inside him. At 34, he had built Blackwood Industries from a small startup into a billion-dollar empire. Yet here he sat, defeated by something as simple as his bachelor status. Mr. Blackwood, the Henderson Group has officially withdrawn their offer, his assistant, Janet, announced as she entered with yet another disappointing update. They cited concerns about your lifestyle choices and questioned your ability to commit to long-term partnerships. Nathaniel loosened his tie, running his fingers through his dark hair. This was the third major deal this month lost to the same ridiculous reasoning. In the business world, being unmarried at his age apparently signaled instability and unreliability. The irony wasn't lost on him that his dedication to building his company had prevented him from maintaining relationships. And now that very success was being threatened by his single status. There has to be another way, he muttered, staring out at the city skyline he had worked so hard to conquer. Janet hesitated at the door. Actually, sir, there might be. My cousin works at a temp agency, and she mentioned something unusual the other day. There are people who provide companionship services for business events. Strictly professional arrangements. The idea was preposterous. Yet as Nathaniel considered his dwindling options, it began to make a twisted sort of sense. If image was everything in his world, perhaps he needed to craft the perfect image. 2 days later, he found himself in an upscale coffee shop, waiting to meet someone who could potentially solve his problem. When Victoria Sterling walked in, she wasn't what he had expected. Instead of the polished, artificial woman he had imagined, she was naturally beautiful with auburn hair that caught the afternoon light and intelligent hazel eyes that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed facade. Mr. Blackwood? She asked, approaching his table with obvious nervousness. I'm Victoria. I believe Janet arranged this meeting. As she sat down, Nathaniel noticed paint stains on her fingernails and a small smudge of blue on her wrist. You're an artist, he observed. Victoria smiled, the first genuine expression he had seen all week. Among other things, I teach art classes to kids, work part-time at a gallery, and paint whenever I can afford the supplies. Janet mentioned you needed someone for business functions, but she wasn't very specific about the details. Nathaniel studied her face, noting the way she met his gaze directly without the calculating look he was used to seeing from women who learned about his wealth. I need a wife, he said bluntly. Victoria nearly choked on her coffee. Excuse me, not a real wife, he clarified quickly. A business arrangement. I need someone to accompany me to events, meet with clients, and essentially play the role of my devoted spouse for approximately 1 year. In return, I would pay you enough to pursue your art full-time and handle any financial obligations you might have. The silence stretched between them as Victoria processed his words. Nathaniel could see the conflict playing out across her expressive features. The artist in her rebelling against the artificial nature of his proposal, while the practical part of her mind calculated what his offer could mean for her future. Why me? She finally asked. Surely there are women in your social circle who would jump at this opportunity. That's exactly why not them, Nathaniel replied. They would want it to become real, or they would use the connection to advance their own social standing. You're different. You have your own dreams and ambitions that don't involve climbing society's ladder or trapping a wealthy husband. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't know anything about me. How can you be so certain I won't fall for your money and lifestyle? Because when you walked in here, you looked at me like I was just another person, a bank account with legs. And because you're arguing with me instead of immediately agreeing to what is, objectively, a very generous offer. She was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. What would this arrangement entail, exactly? You would move into my penthouse, in your own wing with complete privacy. We would attend business dinners, charity events, and social gatherings together. To the outside world, we would appear to be a happily married couple. When we're alone, you would be free to pursue your art and live your life as you choose, and the marriage would be strictly business. No physical expectations? None whatsoever, Nathaniel assured her, though something about the way she asked the question made his pulse quicken. This is purely a professional arrangement. Victoria studied him with those perceptive eyes, and he found himself hoping she would say yes for reasons that had nothing to do with business deals. I need time to think about it, of course, but I do need an answer by Friday. There's a crucial dinner with potential investors next week, and I need to present the image of stability they're looking for. As Victoria gathered her things to leave, she paused. Can I ask you something? Don't you want to find real love someday? Get married for the right reasons? Nathaniel's expression hardened slightly. I've seen what love does to people. My parents destroyed each other in the name of love, and I've watched countless business associates make foolish decisions because of emotional attachments. Love is a luxury I can't afford. That's sad, Victoria said softly. Love isn't supposed to destroy people. Real love lifts you up, makes you better than you were before. After she left, Nathaniel sat alone in the coffee shop, her words echoing in his mind. He had built his entire adult life around the principle that emotions were weaknesses to be avoided, yet something about Victoria Sterling had stirred feelings he thought he had successfully buried years ago. Meanwhile, Victoria walked through the city streets, her mind racing with possibilities. The offer was tempting, incredibly so. She had been struggling financially for years, taking on multiple jobs just to afford her tiny studio apartment and basic art supplies. His proposal would give her the freedom to focus entirely on her passion, to finally have the chance to see if she could make it as a professional artist. But there was something about Nathaniel Blackwood that unsettled her, not in a frightening way, but in a way that suggested this arrangement might not remain as simple and emotionless as he believed. She had seen the loneliness in his eyes, hidden beneath the confident businessman exterior, and recognized it because she carried the same loneliness herself. That evening, she called her best friend Emma for advice. It sounds like a fairy tale, Emma said, after hearing the whole story. Handsome billionaire offers to solve all your problems in exchange for pretending to be his wife. What's the catch? The catch is that it's not real, Victoria replied. And I'm not sure I can pretend to be in love with someone without actually falling for them. So you're already attracted to him? Victoria was quiet for a moment. He's not what I expected. There's something vulnerable about him. Despite all that wealth and power, I think he's been hurt before. And he's using this arrangement to protect himself from getting hurt again. And you think you can fix him? Emma asked gently. No, I don't want to fix him. But I do want to understand him. And maybe, just maybe, I can show him that not all connections have to end in destruction. By Friday, Victoria had made her decision. She called Nathaniel's office and agreed to meet him that evening to finalize the details of their arrangement. When she arrived at his penthouse, she was stunned by the elegance and scale of his home. The space was beautiful but cold, like a museum, rather than a place where someone actually lived. Nathaniel gave her a tour of the wing that would be hers, and she was touched to see that he had already had it stocked with high-quality art supplies and had set up a small studio space near the large windows. You did all this before I even agreed? She asked. I was optimistic, he replied, with a small smile that transformed his entire face. As they sat down to review the contract his lawyers had prepared, Victoria couldn't help but notice how different he seemed in his own space. More relaxed and human than the intimidating businessman she had first met. There's one thing I need to add to this agreement, she said, looking up from the papers. What's that? If either of us starts to develop real feelings, we need to be honest about it. This arrangement only works if we're both committed to keeping it professional, and that means being upfront if the boundaries start to shift. Nathaniel nodded, though something flickered in his eyes that suggested the boundaries might already be less clear than either of them wanted to admit. Agreed. Anything else? Just one more thing. I want to be your partner in this, not just an employee. If I'm going to help you convince people we're happily married, I need to understand your world and the people in it. That means you have to trust me enough to let me in. At least a little bit. As Nathaniel looked at this extraordinary woman, who was about to turn his carefully ordered life upside down, he realized that his original plan to keep things simple and emotionless was already doomed to failure. Victoria Sterling was unlike anyone he had ever met, and he suspected that by the time their year together was over, Neither of their hearts would emerge unscathed. "Deal," he said, extending his hand to seal their agreement. When Victoria shook his hand, the contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them, a preview of the complications to come. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Victoria had settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Her days were spent painting in the beautiful studio space Nathaniel had created for her, while her evenings were devoted to the careful choreography of their public appearances. Their first test had been the investor dinner that prompted this entire arrangement. Victoria had spent days preparing, studying the backgrounds of the attendees and learning about Nathaniel's business strategies. When the evening arrived, she had been nervous, but determined to play her part convincingly. "Remember," Nathaniel had told her in the car on the way to the restaurant, "we've been married for 6 months. We met at a gallery opening where you were displaying your work. I was immediately captivated by your talent and your passion, and I was initially resistant to your advances because I thought you were just another wealthy collector looking for a trophy." Victoria added, smoothing her burgundy silk dress, "But you won me over by commissioning a painting, not for yourself, but for the children's hospital you support." Nathaniel smiled at her addition to their fictional love story. "You're good at this. I'm an artist. Creating believable worlds is part of what I do." The dinner had been a complete success. Victoria charmed the investors with her genuine warmth and intelligence, and when she spoke passionately about the importance of supporting local artists and community programs, Nathaniel found himself genuinely proud to have her by his side. "Your wife is remarkable," one of the investors had told him privately. "You're a lucky man, Blackwood. This kind of partnership is rare in business and in life." Now, as Victoria stood in front of her easel, she reflected on how the line between performance and reality was beginning to blur. Living with Nathaniel had revealed layers to his personality that contradicted his cold businessman image. He was thoughtful and surprisingly funny, often leaving little notes for her about interesting art exhibitions, or bringing her coffee when he noticed she had been working for hours without a break. "How's the painting coming along?" Nathaniel's voice interrupted her thoughts as he entered her studio. Victoria stepped back to reveal her latest work, an abstract piece in deep blues and silvers that seemed to capture the complexity of emotions she had been experiencing. "It's different from my usual style," she admitted. "More complicated." Nathaniel moved closer to study the canvas, and Victoria became acutely aware of his proximity. Over the past weeks, she had grown accustomed to his presence, but there were moments like this when the careful distance they maintained felt artificial and forced. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "There's something almost hopeful about it, despite the darker tones." "Hope can exist in darkness," Victoria replied. "Sometimes that's when it's most powerful." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the pretense fell away entirely. Nathaniel reached out as if to touch her face, then caught himself and stepped back. "We have the charity gala tomorrow night," he said, his voice more formal again. "The one for the children's hospital. It's important to me personally, just for business, I know. You've been working on that speech for days. You noticed?" Victoria smiled. "I notice a lot of things about you, Nathaniel. It's hard not to when we're living together." That evening, they attended a smaller dinner party hosted by one of Nathaniel's oldest friends, James, and his wife Catherine. Victoria had been looking forward to meeting people from Nathaniel's personal life rather than his business circle. "So, Victoria," Catherine said, as the women enjoyed coffee while the men discussed business, "how did you manage to capture our elusive Nathaniel? We had all given up hope of him ever settling down." Victoria laughed, falling easily into the familiar rhythm of their fictional love story. "He's not as elusive as he pretends to be. Underneath all that corporate armor, he's actually quite romantic." "Really? Our Nathaniel? He commissioned my first major painting," Victoria said, the life flowing smoothly. "But instead of keeping it for himself, he donated it to the children's hospital. When I asked him why, he said he wanted other people to experience the joy it gave him. How could I resist a man like that?" What Victoria didn't mention was that the story wasn't entirely fictional. The day before, Nathaniel had indeed commissioned a painting from her, not for their charade, but because he genuinely loved her work. The piece was intended for his private study, And when she had asked him why he wanted that particular abstract piece, he had said it reminded him of the way she saw the world, full of beauty and possibility, even in unexpected places. Later, as they drove home from the dinner party, Nathaniel was unusually quiet. "Did I say something wrong tonight?" Victoria asked. Catherine seemed satisfied with our story. "No, you were perfect. You're always perfect at these things. Then what's bothering you?" Nathaniel pulled the car over and turned to face her. "What you said about me being romantic, about the painting donation, that's not part of our script." Victoria felt her cheeks warm. "I improvised. It seemed to fit the moment, but it was too close to the truth, wasn't it? The painting I commissioned, the way I've been watching you work, bringing you coffee, leaving you those notes about art exhibitions." The air in the car suddenly felt charged with tension. Victoria could feel her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "Nathaniel, we agreed to be honest if our feelings started to change. Are they changing?" Victoria looked into his dark eyes, seeing her own confusion and longing reflected there. "Yes. Are yours?" Instead of answering with words, Nathaniel reached for her, his hand cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he murmured. "I know," Victoria whispered, leaning into his touch. "But it is happening." When he kissed her, it was nothing like the careful, performative affection they had displayed in public. This kiss was hungry and desperate, full of weeks of suppressed attraction and growing emotional intimacy. Victoria's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer as their mouths moved together with perfect synchronicity. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We can't," Nathaniel said, though his actions contradicted his words, as he traced her jawline with his thumb. "Why not?" "Because this is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Emotional complications, feelings that could ruin everything we've built." Victoria pulled back slightly, hurt by his words, but understanding his fear. "What if they don't ruin everything? What if they make everything better?" "I don't know how to do this, Victoria. I don't know how to be in a real relationship. What if I hurt you? What if you don't? What if we're both brave enough to see where this could go?" Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment, seeing not just the beautiful woman he had hired to play a role, but the person who had somehow become essential to his happiness in just a few short weeks. "The charity gala tomorrow," he said finally. "After that, we'll figure out what this means. But tonight, I don't want to pretend anymore." They drove the rest of the way home in charged silence, both knowing that their arrangement had just become infinitely more complicated and more precious. Back at the penthouse, they stood in the hallway between their separate wings, neither wanting to end the evening but both uncertain how to proceed. "Victoria," Nathaniel said softly. "Yes?" "For what it's worth, that story you told Catherine about why you fell for me, I wish it were true. I wish I were the kind of man who could win your heart with romantic gestures instead of business contracts." Victoria stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You are winning my heart, Nathaniel. Maybe not the way either of us planned, but it's happening anyway." This time, when they kissed goodnight, it was tender and full of promise, a preview of the genuine relationship they were both brave enough to pursue. As Victoria lay in her bed that night, she thought about how drastically her life had changed in just a few weeks. She had agreed to this arrangement to secure her financial future and pursue her artistic dreams. But now she found herself dreaming of something entirely different. A future with the complex, wonderful man who was supposed to be just her employer. Meanwhile, Nathaniel stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the city lights and marveling at how Victoria had managed to slip past every defense he had carefully constructed over the years. For the first time in his adult life, the prospect of opening his heart to another person didn't terrify him. Instead, it filled him with the hope he hadn't felt since childhood. Tomorrow's gala would be their biggest test yet, not just as a fake couple, but as two people falling genuinely in love while the whole world watched. The Children's Hospital Charity Gala was the social event of the season, and Victoria had never felt more nervous about a public appearance. It wasn't the usual pre-event jitters she had learned to manage over the past month. Tonight felt different because everything between her and Nathaniel had changed, and she wasn't sure how to navigate their new reality in such a public setting. She had chosen a flowing midnight blue gown that made her feel confident and elegant, and when she emerged from her room to meet Nathaniel, the look on his face told her she had chosen well. "You're breathtaking," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, admiring how devastatingly handsome he looked in his black tuxedo. In the car on the way to the event, Nathaniel reached for her hand. "About last night," he began. "No regrets?" Victoria asked, squeezing his fingers. "None. But I want you to know that whatever happens between us personally, I meant what I said about figuring this out together. I don't want to rush into anything that might hurt either of us." Victoria smiled, touched by his consideration. "I appreciate that. But Nathaniel, I need you to know something too. What I feel for you isn't going away, whether we act on it or not. I'd rather explore this connection than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." The gala was magnificent, held in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. As they made their entrance, Victoria was struck by how natural it felt to be on Nathaniel's arm, how right it seemed to be by his side as he greeted colleagues and friends. "The power couple of the evening," someone commented as they passed, and Victoria realized that the comment no longer felt like an act. Nathaniel's speech about the importance of the children's hospital was passionate and heartfelt, and as Victoria watched him from the audience, she felt a surge of pride and affection that had nothing to do with their business arrangement. "He's quite something, isn't he?" a woman beside her commented. "You must be very proud." "I am," Victoria replied, and meant it completely. After the speech, they were approached by Dr. Helena Martinez, the chief of pediatric surgery at the hospital. "Mr. Blackwood, your support has been invaluable to our program," Dr. Martinez said. "And Victoria, I understand you're an artist. Would you consider creating something for our new patient wing? We believe art has tremendous healing power for children." Victoria looked at Nathaniel, who nodded encouragingly. "I would be honored," she said. "Perhaps a series of murals that tell uplifting stories? That would be perfect. We can discuss the details later." As Dr. Martinez moved on to other guests, Nathaniel turned to Victoria with admiration in his eyes. "That was wonderful of you to offer. It's important work, and it means something to you, which means it matters to me too." The evening progressed beautifully until they encountered someone from Nathaniel's past. Rebecca Thornton, a sophisticated blonde in a stunning red dress, approached their table during dinner. "Nathaniel, darling," she said, in a voice like silk, "I heard you had gotten married, but I simply had to see for myself." Victoria felt Nathaniel tense beside her, and noticed the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Rebecca," he acknowledged coolly. "Victoria, this is Rebecca Thornton." "Rebecca, my wife, Victoria." Rebecca's smile was sharp as she assessed Victoria from head to toe. "How lovely. And where did you two meet?" "At an art gallery," Victoria replied smoothly, slipping naturally into their practice story. "Nathaniel has quite an appreciation for art." "How surprising. In all the time I knew him, he never showed much interest in culture." Rebecca's tone was sweet, but her words carried an obvious sting. Victoria felt rather than saw Nathaniel's discomfort, and something protective flared inside her. "People grow and change," she said firmly. "I think that's one of the most beautiful things about human nature, don't you?" Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Well, I hope you know what a catch you've landed, Victoria. Nathaniel is quite the prize." After Rebecca moved on, Victoria noticed that Nathaniel had withdrawn into himself. "Ex-girlfriend?" she asked gently. "Among other things. We had what I thought was a business partnership as well as a personal relationship. She was more interested in the business opportunities than she was in me." "I'm sorry. That must have been painful." Nathaniel looked at her with surprise. "You're not going to tell me I'm better off without her? You already know that. What I'm saying is that being used and betrayed by someone you trusted hurts, regardless of whether you're better off in the long run." Something in Nathaniel's expression softened. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "I'm a good listener." And I care about you. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, dancing, and shared glances that felt more intimate than any they had exchanged during their previous public appearances. When they finally returned home, both were quiet, lost in their own thoughts about the evening and what it had revealed about their evolving relationship. Nightcap? Nathaniel asked as they entered the penthouse. That sounds perfect. They sat on the terrace with glasses of wine, looking out over the city lights. The silence between them was comfortable now, full of unspoken understanding. Victoria, Nathaniel said eventually, I need to tell you something. She turned to face him, noting the serious expression on his face. When I first proposed this arrangement, I thought I was hiring someone to play a role. I never expected to find someone who would see through all my carefully constructed barriers and make me want to be a better man. Victoria's heart began to race. Nathaniel, let me finish. I know this complicates everything, and I know I'm probably breaking every rule of our agreement, but I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I've already fallen completely. Victoria set down her wine glass and moved closer to him. You're not breaking any rules. You're just being honest about what's been obvious to both of us for weeks. And how do you feel about that? I feel like the luckiest woman in the world, she said softly. Because I'm falling in love with you too, Nathaniel. Not with your money or your lifestyle, but with the man who brings me coffee when I'm working late, who notices when I'm trying a new painting technique, who gives passionate speeches about helping children he's never met. Nathaniel reached for her hands, holding them gently. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a choice. We can end our arrangement and try to build something real together, or we can admit that what we've built is already real and stop pretending it isn't. What do you want? Victoria smiled, feeling more certain than she had about anything in her entire life. I want to stop pretending. I want to be your wife for real, not because of a contract, but because I choose you and you choose me. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, holding her close against his chest. I choose you, Victoria. I choose you every day for the rest of our lives, if you'll have me. When they kissed this time, it was with the knowledge that they were no longer acting, no longer pretending, no longer hiding behind the safety of a business arrangement. This was real and terrifying and absolutely perfect. There's just one problem, Victoria said, pulling back slightly. What's that? We're going to need a real wedding. I want to marry you properly, not just on paper. Nathaniel laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. I think that can be arranged. I know this great venue planner. 6 months later, Victoria stood in a beautiful garden ceremony, wearing a dress she had chosen because she loved it, not because it served a purpose. As she walked down the aisle toward Nathaniel, she thought about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as a business arrangement designed to protect his reputation and secure her financial future had become the greatest love story either of them had ever imagined. They had found in each other not just passion and companionship, but partnership, understanding, and the kind of deep connection that transforms two separate lives into one shared adventure. When the officiant asked if they took each other as husband and wife, their answers came from the heart. I do, Nathaniel said, his voice strong and sure. For love, for real this time, forever. I do, Victoria whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. For love, for keeps, for always. As they sealed their vows with the kiss, both knew that they had found something far more valuable than any business deal or financial security. They had found their perfect match, their other half, their happily ever after. The little girl inside Victoria, who had dreamed of fairy tale love, had been right all along. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes the very thing you think you don't want turns out to be exactly what your heart has been searching for. Their marriage of convenience had become the most inconvenient thing either of them had ever experienced, disrupting all their careful plans and well-ordered lives. And neither would trade it for all the safety and predictability in the world.